When did you realize someone was insane during a conversation? And how did you get yourself out of it? My old boss. He believed that all the traffic lights went on red on purpose so the police had time to search his house. He had many more issues, but that was for sure crazy. I stayed working with him after a friend of him told me that many years before he found his mom dead in her closet. Locked up. Thieves went inside her house and locked her up in a closet and left, not knowing she had no visitors ever. So one day he goes there and opens her closet. She was dead for months. There's no getting out of them if someone is truly insane. I work at a homeless shelter in the winter, and let me tell you, I hear the most random nonsense, like absolute gibberish and insanity. Either the people are high out of their mind or insane. If I'm at the watch desk, I can't do much except try to encourage them back to bed. If I'm on patrol I can claim I have to go do something, but really I just zone out and let them speak. I knew a boy from my old school who was the stereotypical loner and weird kid. He often talked about hunting animals on his parents' farm and showed people pictures of his sword collection. He also wore heavy belt buckles and joked about using them as a weapon. When there was a school shooting recently, he was like, "Oh cool." Didn't talk to him after that. He was like, "Oh cool." Didn't talk to him after that. No, you're supposed to become their friend after that. A few years back I worked night shift in an adult store. We were the only 24-hour place around for the majority of my time there, so I became accustomed to helping people who were in distress or stranded. Like most adult stores, we were located on a busy highway. One day a guy came stumbling in, soaked with sweat, in January, in Wisconsin, so this was an uncommon sight. I greeted him, and he said hello to me, then set his bag behind the counter without me asking, so he'd obviously been in the store before. We didn't allow large purses or backpacks in the store, and proceeded to stand on his side of counter breathing heavily for a moment. Finally I asked how he was. He said he'd been running. "Okay, anything I can do for you?" He says, "Yeah, you can call the police." He'd been chased by guys in a van. I kicked right into rescue mode. I got the guy the phone and ran to get him a cup of water to help him calm down. When I got back, he was shaking too much to make the call, so he handed the phone back to me. It was covered in sweat. I call 911, tell them what he told me, but then his story started growing as I'm on the phone with dispatch. Suddenly there were a bunch of guys, and they had hammers, and they were trying to get into the store. I had a camera feed for the whole building. Not only was there no one trying to get into the building, there was no one but me and this guy, period. So then I realize I'm by myself in a store in the middle of the night with a crazy person. Dispatch asked me if I could see the guys. I could not, and I told her as much. Then dude started to get upset with me. Great, I'm by myself in a store with a crazy person in the middle of the night, and now he's mad at me. Luckily I managed to calm him down and explained that I was only answering the dispatch person's questions. This was good enough for him. I managed to stay on his good side until the police arrived. They took him away. I have no idea where to. I never heard more about it. He came back a while later to shop and seemed fine. Define get out of it. He told me that no one can psychoanalyze him, and I said, in my experience only psychopaths say that. I was right. He later tried to kidnap and kill my mother. Always trust your instincts. Coworker. So let me tell you about this guy who found Noah's Ark. Thankfully my wife came out of the office and told me we need to get going. I don't want to get married anytime soon, but if I do, this is a perk I really want to use the heck out of. Oh, it's my wife. How convenient. Go. When he told me that the world was filled with signs that he had to decipher, and gave me an explanation that made no sense whatsoever. Yeah, that happened to me about 6 years back. Medication can fix it sometimes. When they were trying to make me feel bad that their 17-year-old Yorkshire Terrier died at my grandfather's funeral. This was my aunt. I thought it sounded off when she told me she once did an at-home abortion with a butter knife at 12 years old, but it turns out that was the least disturbing part of the conversation, which included her being abused by her parents, then later proclaiming them very loving and supportive. Graphic descriptions of how she cut her wrists, the right way even. in front of her ex who supposedly abused her mentally to show her how much pain she was in, followed by a one, 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 followed by a one. It was the first time that we met. I just ghosted her. I'm really sorry if all of that happened to her, but at one point I seriously couldn't decide whether or not she was lying to me, and at one point it was blatantly obvious that she was completely delusional. She tried hitting on me later and I swear to God it was the scariest thing ever because I was just waiting for her to whip out a knife and start cutting again. She seems to be doing good now. I rarely see her, but she has her own name brand website where she shares her life and thoughts and I sometimes creep. Still sounds a little crazy if you ask me. My girlfriend's mom called me homophobic because I disagreed that my cat was queer because he has a slightly high-pitched meow. My so and I went to a head shop to buy a new piece. The guy working was like mid-60s, long flowing white hair and beard. He was like a stereotypical hippie head shop guy. He was really nice and helpful, but he started going off on a tangent about how he'd followed this band he liked around because he dug the music and the vibe. He went to like 6 of their shows like some fans do, but then he was really aggressive and wanted us to know that it was, in fact, not a gay thing. We assured him that we understood. Then he started talking about how he doesn't pay taxes on the shop or his home and he's fought the man in court to prove that he has the right not to pay taxes. He claims that there is copious evidence that they're all just royalties to the crown and nobody owns him. He gave us several articles to read and cited some constitutional bylaw or something that said taxes were still being paid to England. We were in this store an hour after we had picked the item we were looking for because we panicked and both just kept agreeing with him to be polite. My boyfriend and I had a moment where we looked at each other just briefly and knew that we were in the presence of a madman. I was 17 and I woke up one morning and went about my normal routine of breakfast in the living room when a guy I never met came up and started talking to me. My parents had lots of friends so I didn't think much of it at the time. I just tried to carry on a civil conversation with the guy. It was pretty hard to keep pace with the guy though he talked really fast and sort of evolved his topics really quickly, and the weirder it got the more I started to panic. He started talking about how great nature was and how his wife had him walking around all day in nature. Then he started asking me if I believed in God, then asked me to pray with him, and then in the middle of his prayer that I wasn't really into he just says that he is God and starts asking if I believed in him. There's no good way to describe talking to someone who literally believes they're the creator of all things, so I went off to try and figure out who he was and find someone to help me with him. He was my stepmother's sister's husband who had recently suffered a car accident in the military overseas and was staying with us a few days because his wife, who now had to take care of him, was having a hard time adjusting, to put it lightly, but I'll never forget how normal he seemed at first. Had a much older single male neighbor, Mikey, when I was in college who wasn't all there. The neighborhood was single family houses that were made into condos or townhomes, each with their own separate entrance, but shared walls. Turns out Mikey was our downstairs neighbor and his front door was right under my bedroom. First day night in the place unpacking, I hear some loud concussive slams in rapid succession and manic babbling fading in and out with each thud. I move toward the sound until I'm looking out below the bedroom window to see a silhouette of a squat man being occluded quickly and followed by a slam of a door, only to reappear again as the door is opened just as quickly. It's held open for his babbling to escape out into the night, only to be punctuated by another loud slam of the door, over and over again, for 2 hours without fail. I never saw Mikey that night, only his shadow. Fast forward a week or so and I'm on the phone walking back from campus and I see a Danny DeVito shaped man waddling down the sidewalk conversing with himself but wildly gesticulating, throwing out hands and serving up talking points to the wind. He does the what the frick hands at the neighbor's yard, the this crap right here at the cars on the street, the up yours to the dogs, all the way until he's standing in front of me, because once he got in front of me, I became the sole focus of his belligerent efforts. I didn't know he was my literal next door neighbor at the time as I didn't recognize his shadow, but he's following my same path home, ranting and raving unintelligible nonsense. I started to run through options in my head of how to deal with this lunatic, but eventually got home and went upstairs all while he's still trailing behind raving. I was relieved when it finally got quiet, but only for a second. The slamming of the door commenced shortly after and I was looked out the window again. I recognized the DeVito silhouette. Appear, disappear, slam, open. Turns out Mikey is fairly harmless. He doesn't drive or bike but has family that checks on him regularly. We eventually became friends, and while his existence was filled with mental health troubles, he was as a child. Mikey passed away some years later, but some say the door still slams to this day, over and over again. He sounds like he either was developmentally disabled or suffered some kind of psychosis. Really sad. I went to a dentist. When I scheduled the apt, I was actually excited because he personally answered and I was able to be seen right away. When I got there was no one in the office at my 2 PM apt. I should have seen that red flag and left, but I didn't. During the exam he was nice enough. By the way, only him, no employees. And he started going into his life story. I learned about the love of his life who was 30 years younger that got away. How his house has no electricity or water so he showers and cooks at the office. How the other 2 dentists close to him are sabotaging him and lying to patients about him. According to him, the other dentists reroute his phone lines so his calls go to them and not him. I was lucky how he fixed it himself so he was able to get my call. He wouldn't get the city to fix it because they are in on it with the dentists. I was relieved when he was talking about the love of his life he stalked for years because it took my mind off of the craziness that had sharp objects in my mouth. When I left, I went in because my wisdom teeth were killing me. He wanted to schedule surgery to get them removed and to fix 2 cavities. He actually wanted to do the surgery then, but I refused, saying I would need to find a ride. That's when he said he doesn't give drugs. He isn't allowed to anymore. I noped the frick out. Went to a new dentist who told me I didn't even have any cavities. That was a creepy 2 hours. A customer came into our store years back, upset over his monthly cost. I work in the cell phone industry. He grew more irate, getting louder and more belligerent when suddenly, the guy stopped mid-tirade and proclaimed, "You've made me so mad I've crapped sure as heck." This crazy butthole crapped his pants in anger, which floored us seeing as he didn't move. A grown man with a fresh dump visibly moving down his legs just stood there, expecting to finish the conversation. To his point, he got exactly what he asked for, credit-wise. Well negotiated, sir. I worked as a cab driver and picked this neckbeard up from the bar. He starts talking about a Batman movie. I thought he was talking about Justice League and I'm like, no, I haven't seen it. Looks neat, blah blah blah. But no, he was talking about the Batman movie he starred in, which the Chinese government won't allow the release of for 300 million years. The movie really took a toll on him as he had to do 400 fight scenes a day, including one against a 10-foot tall plan who he ultimately defeated. Then it comes out that he wasn't just playing Batman. He is the real Batman. When he was 8 years old he made some wise real estate investments and became a billionaire. He called himself Bruce Wayne. He could have actually been convincing if he wasn't one, obese or 2. Didn't throw out such insane numbers describing his stats, like fighting an army of millions, having a 100-million-year-old sword, and getting into little 100s of fights a day. Just the more he talked the more I realized how delusional he was. Really wished I'd recorded him. But no, he was talking about the Batman movie he starred in, which the Chinese government won't allow the release of for 300 million years. Warner Brothers. Playing the long con here. Was on Tinder date with a guy who was a concert pianist. He was very attractive, fluent in 3 languages, and I was very excited. I arrived at the bar and breathed a sigh of relief that he looked like his pics. However, after several minutes of conversation, I realized he was scary, like, turn my bones into wine chimes scary. Within 30 minutes, he suggests we go back to his apartment to show me his 3 different pianos, and I politely told him that I wasn't interested. He flipped out, started saying I was a prude, so I just simply stood up, told him to frick off, and walked out of the bar. Well, sounds like every pianist that I've ever met. I was 7 or 8, staying with my great aunt. I knew she was weird, but I didn't understand what the adults said about her. I just thought she was a nice weird lady, until she went into the kitchen and came back ranting about donuts. I didn't catch all of it at first, but eventually worked out that she was complaining about the motorcycle riding gnomes having stolen her donuts again, and she was going to speak to Jesus about it when she had tea with him on Tuesday. I laughed way too hard at this. I had a boss once who absolutely 100% believed that the government, well, really a behind the scenes real government, not the fake puppets we get to see, not only controlled the climate, but also created natural features like the Grand Canyon and the very recent past. I just politely went how interesting, because it was just a summer job. A behind the scenes real government, not the fake puppets we get to see. I think that's called the deep state now. I was on a business trip where we had 3 cars to share amongst 12 people. One of my passengers, a co-worker, tried very valiantly to convince the rest of us that things like GPS and cell phones have been in existence for well over 100 years and that the government has been keeping these items from us. When I asked where the technology came from way back then, he said aliens had come to Earth and deposited these items and taught high-up United States government officials how to create and use these things. He never did tell me what caused the government to out the secrets and let us all have said tech items. He also told me I have nice feet. When he said you just can't trust the Chinese, you know, they're everywhere, I was silent, made polite conversation for a few more minutes and then ended the conversation. It's the Japanese you can't trust, they have ninjas planted everywhere. So during high school, I worked at a theater in a small town, so for the most part, the job was really easy. The only problem is that all the strange and crazy people seem to visit our theater, and one of these bizarre characters will forever stick in empty mind. As anyone who has ever worked at movie theater knows, you don't really do anything when you are waiting in between shows except stand around and talk to co-workers because at this point most of the work is done. So I am standing there talking with our assistant manager, his girlfriend, and another co-worker, and we are all trying to relax because this was the weekend that The Force Awakens had come out, which made the theater exceptionally busy in comparison to normal. Anyways, as we are waiting around talking, this old man walked by us on his way to the bathroom, which is pretty normal. On his way back, however, he decided to regale us with his life story. I don't remember the exact details of his story, but it ranged from getting a rare collector's item from one of the Star Wars movie, I think a part of the Death Star or a X-Wing, to making it big working with Apple in the early days of the company. However, where it really got weird was when he went on this long tangent about quitting his job to join a Greek traveling choir. He then began serenading us, specifically me. All of this was very weird, but what really sent it home was when he claimed he had been saved from AIDS by joining the Greek choir. At this point, all of us were beyond uncomfortable and questioning why the man didn't just go back to the movie. So in order to get him to return, my assistant manager ran down to the office, came back out, and asked us all to go down there. After we are all out of the lobby, we kind of just watch the man stand around waiting for us to return. After like 5 minutes of waiting, the man snatches one of our drinks which was left on the counter and tries to go back into the movie. My co-worker then runs back into the lobby, grabs the drink, and tells the man to go back into the movie, which he does. I got into a taxi in my very average and unexciting English town and the driver spotted my suitcase. "Oh, you've been traveling? Where?" "Just went up to see family back up in Scotland." "Bet you don't get many of those dark ones up there." "Sorry, you know, the ones with darker skin." I went completely quiet at this point and just let him talk. He went through 7 different conspiracy theories, many racial comments and homophobic comments. This was a 10-minute drive from the train station to the street next to mine. The one thing I responded to was, "What have you got planned for tonight?" My boyfriend and I are going to that new Caribbean place in town. I love foreign food, it's just better in every way to British food. It's just so boring and white, you know? I did not tip and I spent 10 minutes walking around to make sure he didn't follow me. Ugh. I hate it when other white people see my white skin and assume we're racism buddies now. I wasn't trying to make this cab ride political, but no, I'm not going to sit here and smile politely while you try to shove ignorant opinions into my mouth. Have to converse with mentally ill people all the time as a nurse. Part of my job description. A big part is being kind but firm. Acknowledging that they feel that way, but reminding them that their perception while it feels valid, is not true, but that's coming from a therapeutic relationship. I try to avoid crazy people when I'm not at work. For some reason, mentally ill people seem to gravitate towards me. Maybe I look kind. I really don't know. I'm preparing to study nursing later this year, so hopefully it's readied me somewhat. Apologies for formatting and spelling on my phone. This is not a question I feel privileged to answer. It really hurts me. I'll try keep it short. I'm feeling lazy. About 6 years ago my friend started throwing knives at me. I was at his family home with him alone because he was having a bit of a freak out before his final uni exam. Knives were going deep into the wall floor around me. I waited for him to run out of knives, dodged a few other glass projectiles. I grabbed him and put him to bed. He went out like a light. He was babbling random crap and had presumably been up all night drinking and playing online poker. I set his alarm for 4 hours before his final university exam. He got up, passed it, then disappeared for 2 weeks. His family called me and went mental because we threw a house party and fricked crap up. Told them to go find your crazy son and help him. He's gone full schizo. Told them exactly what happened. They were too proud or guarded to believe me. He wound up trying to murder my so about a month later. I had to wrestle him away from her and put him through 3 doors and down a set of stairs. I didn't break the doors. I did manage to get them open. I'm not a freaking superhero. All my neighbors came out to see WTF was going on. 2 weeks after that he murdered his own, so don't want to go into details on that. I'm currently seeing someone to manage PTSD for this crap. Both incidents I had with him, he was seeking my help. I had to get physical both times. Freaking sucks feeling like I very suddenly lost my closest friend. Especially when he is still alive and physically healthy. I really freaking miss him and how he was. There is a few news articles about my friend. I don't want to highlight them as I feel very sensitive about it all. 6 years on and my pain revolving these incidents has only grown. His family were an extension of my family. I don't see any of them now. I have seen my friend about once a year since this happened. This never really did me any good. Every time had been quite a traumatic event. Particularly when he was in maximum security mental health wards. Last time we talked was on the phone 2 years ago. He phoned me 2 minutes after I fell off my skateboard and snapped a knee ligament. I think I was in some kind of shock. I walked about a mile to get home. After the call I went to try drive myself to hospital. When I hit the clutch my knee folded over to the left and I had to call my so's parents to drive me. TLDR. Best mate throws knives at me during a meltdown. I put him to bed. A month later he attacked my so screaming I'll freaking kill you. I dragged him through 3 doors and pushed him down a flight of stairs. 2 weeks later, he actually murdered someone. The frick dude. Jay on the train. Jay on the train wanted to create a new world in his vision where one side is permanently day and the other night. He was also on the prowl for his queen. Jay was frustrated that so many people on the train put in headphones instead of having normal conversation. I spoke to Jay until I got to my stop, but next time I saw Jay, I watched him wait until some other poor sucker made eye contact with him. Jay was very racist. Jay also had no recollection of introducing himself to me, having a full depth insane conversation with me. Haven't seen Jay in a while. DC Metro, Orange Line. Not too unusual for a DC Metro encounter. Mayo. Back in high school in my AP literature class, I was paired up with a guy in which we were supposed to debate the subject of relationships. Weird topic to choose but whatever. I was just there to get through the class so I could graduate. He told me he believed that if an 84-year-old man was in love with a 15-year-old girl, or vice versa, it was okay for the man to rape the girl for his pleasure just because, and the girl should just go along with it as older people won't live much longer and should be able to do what they please. This freaked me right out and I never talked to him after that. 3 months later he was caught trying to sell child pornography to his best friend at the time, who turned him into the police and found he had apparently been doing this for a couple years now. What a piece of crap. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.